I'm Marissa German, out of school here. Wolcott is a college prep high school designed for students with learning differences, using a strength-based approach that honors how each student learns best. Tonight's event, which is brought to you by Wolcott's Tyree Institute, embodies that same spirit of innovation and unapologetic ambition for change. We're gathered here because we believe that the way things have always been done isn't quite good enough. Tonight, we have the privilege of welcoming Dr. Christina Cipriano, Associate Professor at the Yale Child Study Center and Director of the Education Collaboratory at Yale University. Dr. Cipriano is an internationally recognized expert in the science of learning and development, bringing both rigorous scholarship and lived experience to her work. Her groundbreaking new book, Be Unapologetically Impatient, challenges us to reject the status quo and demand better, using learning science, emotional intelligence, and gratitude as our tools for change. And joining her in conversation is Dr. Kimberly Schonert-Reichl, the NoVo Foundation Endowed Chair in Social and Emotional Learning and Professor of Psychology at UIC, whose research explores how to foster empathy, compassion, altruism, and resilience in young people. Tonight, we'll dive into Dr. Cipriano's book and explore just what it means to be unapologetically impatient for change. Following our program at 7, Dr. Cipriano will sign books, and copies are available for purchase if you haven't gotten yours yet. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Christina Cipriano and Dr. Kimberly Schonert-Reichl.
Thanks so much. Marissa, thank you so much for that generous introduction. Kim, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you to each and every one of you for taking time out of your schedule to be here. And how am I doing? Is that close enough? I'm like, okay. I know you have a lot of options with how you can spend your time. And I'm deeply honored that you've chosen to be here in community with us tonight, with everything else that's going on, so we can all live and learn together about our opportunities to do better in the service of all kids and families. So just thank you so much for being here. I heard there's like a lot of traffic out there, and things can be a little hectic. I think there's a baseball game, there's a few things going on, some bridge construction. So thank you for everything that you did to be here today, and I look forward to making this a very worthwhile conversation. And Kim, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be here to be in conversation with me. I'm really looking forward to kind of digging in on the book together.
Yes, I'm so excited. But before I begin with my not large number of questions for you, I just want to hear a bit from you from your book.
Absolutely. So I'll get us started and just share. I'll read a little excerpt from the beginning of the book to kind of get us going. And before I do that, I need to say that it's really hard for me to read a piece of the book and to skip anything. So this is it's a short form trade book, and I'm an academic, and so like every word counts, every word matters, and it was like very thoughtfully and like poetically and designed with rhythm and rhyme and how I bring you all on the storytelling journey with me throughout the book. And so when I've learned this process of having the privilege of getting to share my book now as I'm going across the country, that it like hits me in a way when I'm like, oh, but I want to just keep going. And so anyway, I'll read a little bit and then we're going to talk. And I know Kim had some things that she really loved about the book that she wanted to bring to bear for the Wolcott community. And so with that, I will just kick us off with a little bit about Be Unapologetically Impatient. So I'm just going to read a short piece from the opening of the book. You don't want to be like us and have to work any job you can when you grow up, my parents told my 3 siblings and me. You can do anything you want in life as long as you stay in school. With an education, you can choose to do what makes you happy, they'd say. And since we can't help you with your homework, you need to ask your teachers. Your teachers are the experts, and school is there to help you. When you don't understand something, ask. So I did. I asked my 3rd grade teacher why I had to fit all my answers to questions in the tiny lines on the worksheets. I asked my 6th grade teacher why our school was closed for some holidays and not others. I asked my junior high school assistant principal why we needed to buy our own calculators for math class, given they were required to access the math in our textbooks. And now I'm going to fast forward through. Okay. A few months later, I found myself starting a PhD in applied developmental and educational psychology. at Boston College and a certificate in human rights and international justice at BC Law School. I was going to be a psychologist. I wanted to be the change I wanted to see in the world by doing research that evolved school policies and practices. So for the next 5 years, I deeply studied how the science of learning and social emotional development could support all kids and communities to thrive. And while I learned how to think like a prevention scientist in my coursework, my understanding expanded most, and I like to say this is where I fell in love, in working in schools with youth and educators who were all othered by the US education system. I taught youth with emotional and behavioral challenges who were relegated to windowless basements in abandoned public school buildings taken over by the state. Youth learning in correctional facilities, youth who were wards of the state residential programs, medically complex youth in and out of exclusionary public school placements, and neurodivergent youth banished to hallways and trailers on the outskirts of their neighborhood public schools. I saw the best of humanity in their educators and support staff colliding with a never-ending sea of barriers to their students' joy. All of these unfortunate experiences were laced with systemic prejudice. The systems designed to support the youth who had been positioned by society to be most in need of services and social support were undeniably broken. I asked anyone who would listen to me why. From school administrators, district leaders, mental health professionals, parents, advocates, teachers, specialists, families, and the students themselves. And the answer, it was always some version of, it's just the way we do things here. It's just the way things are. These lessons I learned about how the system isn't working for those deemed by society to need it most, they came home for me when I became a mother. Seemingly overnight, I found my family on the receiving end of injustice, masquerading as common practice, as compliance, as standard procedure, as conventional wisdom, as a checkbox. And the injustices just kept getting uglier with each interaction I had, no matter the grain size. It did not discriminate, be it at our kitchen table, the local playground, on the sidelines during a recreational soccer game, or at a national theme park. It didn't matter if we were at the doctor's office for a wellness check or riding in the back of an ambulance, again en route to the emergency room. It was in their elementary school classrooms, around the table, at the IEP meeting, at the school board meeting, at the university, and on the floor of the Senate. I heard it everywhere. It's just the way things are. It's just the way we do things here. And we were expected to be patient with it. I'm gonna skip. I have been thinking about writing this book for a long time, but what pushed me to finally sit down and do it was when our middles, Salvatore and Eleanor, started asking questions. When Salvatore asked me why he had to hide for a drill at school. When Eleanor asked me why I call her neurodivergence a superpower, while a teacher told her disability is an illness. When they asked why we had to wait for another bus to accommodate their older brother Miles and his wheelchair, when all the other families got to go ahead of us. My children's questions inspired me to a new level of realization. Why are we being so patient in the face of injustice? What are we waiting for? To be sure, nearly everyone believes that patience is a virtue, and in fact, it is one of few principles of correctness that communities across ideological divides agree on. But there is a distance between being polite and being right. It is time to be unapologetically impatient in our pursuit of justice. I see this in my own life when navigating systems of education, healthcare, and industry that are not designed with my family and our needs nor best interest in mind. And you can see this every day in the quiet experiences of all families who are navigating perceived disadvantages from disability, language, income, culture, education, and the discrimination they encounter on the regular. This book is my love letter to my children, my family, and our generation. It's for every person who has felt small and seen wrong. It's for care providers and makers and dreamers and doers, the educators and the architects of a future that embraces a common humanity. It may take our lifetime to change how systems operate and even how you and I are seen in the system, but we can each harness the power in our positionality right now to interrupt the status quo. We can do it every day by prioritizing compassionate, empathetic inquiry. We can ask questions just like my dad taught me, with the intention of calling people in, not out. We can share expertise in the form of lived experience in real time to affect change. Just like I will share stories and illustrations to show you how each and every one of us can use evidence-based strategies to build a future for all children and families now. When our patience manifests as complacency with injustice, we are waiting for systems change at the expense of our families, and I am not waiting for justice at the expense of my children, and you do not need to either. It's time to be unapologetically impatient. Let me show you how. Thank you.
Wow. I'm just so honored to be here with you this evening, Chris, to talk about your book. I read it, I have to say, on my commute on the train. I devoured it. It was like a feast, and where I really took in every morsel, every word. So I have to say, I really recognized that poetry. I really felt like it was poetry, the way that you wrote it and the way that you did the spacing in the lines, and you could talk a little bit more about that. You're really my hero. I've told you this before, but like now it's like beyond. You're my superhero, and you have accomplished so much, and you have such amazing humanity and passion for your children and for all children. I do want to say, I wrote down a few remarks just to begin this. You're really one of those rare people who can move seamlessly between scholarly work, academia, and humanity and fierce advocacy. I mean, that's what I see. You are fierce. You are the mama bear. Do you ever get told that you're
Yes.
the mama bear? Okay. I just want to make sure. Your work in the area of social emotional learning, your work in the area of understanding children with learning differences is really advanced the field in ways that someone so early in your career have made such an impact already, and so this is so important because some of you might not know that Chris really has made such an imprint on the field of social emotional learning so importantly, and now with this book you've taken things to a whole new level. Anyway, so I could go on. I have pages. I have pages and pages of.
We don't need to do that.
How amazing.
No, we don't.
Anyway, you're just incredible. I just hope everyone gets a chance to read this book and really devour it. And I feel like I want to go back and read different sections because I was going back and I feel like I know all the kids. I can't wait to meet them all. I really can't. But my first question was really kind of what inspired you to write this book. But you already kind of told us what inspired you. But it's your children, but there must have been some other people who were behind you. I really believe in that, the Bowlby quote, everyone works to their best ability when they have trusted others standing behind them. And so I wonder who were those for you?
Yeah, I love that question. So yes, the kids' questions were, inspired the thought process there within of being I need to write this book and I need to write it now. And I guess about 2 years ago, I was at an academic conference, just like I'm in town right now in Chicago at an academic conference. I was at a conference called AERA, and I was meeting with publishers. And so I was I have this idea for this book, and I was, kind of pitching my idea, and I was realizing that it was kind of falling on the wrong group of people. I was talking to academic publishers, and I did not want to write an academic book. I wanted to write a book for everyone. The book that you pick up at the airport and you read on a plane. I really wanted to lean into the popular psychology side of the applications of my science. And so I was kind of sitting with that thinking gosh, I just wasted a few hours meeting with all these publishers and that got nowhere. And I met up with a couple of other academics. So, and I named them in the book in the back end, but the first one that I met with was Sean Talamis, who's an incredible academic, and he used to work with Angela Duckworth, if you've heard any of her work. And we were chatting about, and he's a professional coach, and so I was telling him how I was disappointed, and I said, I'm gonna wait until I go on sabbatical to write this book. Going on sabbatical in academic jobs is basically you get a large chunk of time off, and I'm that's when I'm going to write the book. I'm going to be eligible for sabbatical in 1.5 or 2 years, and then I'm going to figure this out and write this book. And Sean was like, Chris, you clearly thrive when you're busy. I don't know who else needs to tell you that, but look, you are managing so many different pieces at once. If you want to write the book now, write the book now. like it'll fall into place, because why wait until you suddenly have the time? Like that's not at all how you operate professionally and personally, for that matter. And so I left that conversation and then proceeded to meet up with a couple of other academics, and I was like, so I'm writing this book, and I just started pitching the book to a few other folks across the field and being like, here's what it is, here's what I'm thinking, the application of emotional intelligence and gratitude and mindset. And I've been told by actually a shared friend of ours, Tim Shriver. He had told me a long time ago when he heard me speak, he said, "You are the most unapologetically impatient person I've ever heard talk about their children and the rights of people with disabilities." And I was like, Tim, when I write a book, that's the title. That's it. That's where we're going with it. And so I was like, here it is, and it was time to do it. And then that was it. Like the next week I found the right publisher and then started moving forward.
That's amazing. I love that story because it really tells you the serendipity about these different encounters you can have. And it was probably good that you had those meetings that didn't work out as well, because it really helped you solidify what I want to do.
What you want to do.
Yeah, and it's and that's amazing. So one of the things in your book, your reflections on parenting neurodiverse children and navigating the IEP process are incredibly powerful, and how you talked about that. I learned so much, even though I used to teach courses on teachers doing the IEPs, and I learned so much. How have those experiences changed as you've kind of learned, and like where are you now? Because I think you said Eleanor is having a IEP meeting at the beginning of November.
She is, yes, and Miles too. They're both due. So two of my kiddos have learning plans, and I was talking with Marissa yesterday how Wolcott learning plans is the term that gets used there within of setting up supports. And in the book I kind of walk through when thinking about the education of our young people who learn and think differently, in the ways in which we kind of the diversity with which we see the world, that the school systems in many ways, the way they do things is setting up and waiting for failure rather than setting up to succeed. So there's this, this idea that a child has to show a certain threshold of need before we intervene. And so, what could happen, hypothetically, right, if instead of waiting for them to fail to then say, now we're ready to get the supports in place, now, we actually did that and set them up and kind of treated it more like a scaffold where all the supports in place and we fade them. And for those of us who are in, I had the privilege of meeting a number of folks along the way who kind of intersect with special education. In the special education training literature, that's a very common thing of thinking about fading supports and, supporting independence over time. But in our, the way many setups are in public education, particularly around the way that we think about students with learning differences and the ways in which their learning differences show up and present in schools, they often start with the treatment of a behavior and not an acknowledgement of diversity in knowing, seeing, and navigating your world. And so I tell the story within the book. I have one chapter kind of dedicated to Eleanor's journey and experience, and how the school system saw her diversity as a behavior, and then how they just kept continuously kind of feeding into the behavior side of things. And she learned that the more extreme things she said or did, the more she got to be out of that classroom with like her favorite person in the school, who at that time was the school's BCBA, and she was just a remarkable woman who she felt safe with. And and I would ask her, I'd say like, Eleanor, like why are you doing those things, or why did you say those things? And she's incredibly bright, and she would say like, well, I get to go spend time with Miss G, like I get to be out of the classroom. And she'd say to me, I don't think it's safe for me to be in there. Right? But yet the school would view that behavior, that elopement, that fill in the blank, I see many of you nodding with that, as like she's a threat to be in the classroom. It's not safe for the other students for her to be in there. And so there was this juxtaposition and this tension that we unfortunately did the delicate dance with throughout. And maybe I'll take a minute to read about a piece of that there within. And as I get to the page I want to start reading on, I've been really struck recently in the past 2 years on how we hear all about the narrative of learning loss. How many people have heard that, right? Learning loss. And the conversation centers around, the learning loss is a narrative that was structured by the educational media and educational researchers about the instructional time that was lost during the COVID-19 pandemic, height therein, and, how do we catch up from learning loss? And yet, when we think about our diverse learners, right? The amount of learning that is lost while they're waiting for the opportunity to learn how they can learn best, it's on average one whole school year. Like, what could change if we structured that in a different way? And that's part of the argument that I go into in the book. And so maybe I'll just read one little piece about this as an analogy. Our 5-year-old daughter, Luciana, had just gotten her first two-wheeler, aka her big kid bike, when I was writing this book. It was turquoise and pink with shiny tassels and bright seats and a highly coveted little pink bag that in lieu of a basket had a zipper that sparkled and could hold her favorite stuffed animal of the moment. It also came with 2 training wheels on it. Now, as time and the New England weather allows, she'll find her balance on getting comfortable on the bike with both training wheels on. When she's ready, we'll remove one training wheel, and when she's got balance with her setup, we'll remove the second training wheel. She'll transition to riding with a trusted adult holding on to the back of her seat, walking and then running until she's riding along confidently on her own independently. She'll take off, solo. I can feel it. I can see her smile of pride on the horizon. It may take years or months or weeks or days, but I know it's coming. Now, the box from the manufacturer says the bike is for children's ages 4 to 6, so I could interpret this packaging to mean Luciana should learn to ride her bike without her training wheels by her 6th birthday. Or I could use her siblings as an example of when it's likely to arrive. So Miles was unfortunately never able to learn to ride a bike independently. Salvatore was nearly 6, very cautious to learn to ride his bike. The risk of falling was undesired, highly demotivating. He waited until the training wheels were essentially wings on either side of his bike to let us take them off. Eleanor, on the other hand, couldn't get the training wheels off fast enough. She was nearly 5, highly motivated to keep up with her brother, whatever the cost. She even tried to unsuccessfully remove them herself with a bubble wand in our backyard. Now, there is no wrong answer here. There is only what is right for each child. And so every child's zone of proximal development is uniquely their own. Although their zones of possible development will likely intersect to some degree, they also will differ based on multiple factors of access, motivation, preferences, and fears. Luciana may be more or less motivated to achieve her level of independence of riding her bike with no supports. We'll let her show us when she's ready. We'll follow her lead. But what we won't do is wait for her to fall off her first two-wheeler to put a training wheel on it. We won't wait for her to skin her knees and scratch the palm of her hands to put the training wheels on. We won't wait for her to feel pain, fear, frustration, or embarrassment. We won't wait for her to feel incapable of riding the bike. One may say these items are, I skipped a page, to wheels on the bike. We will support her as she learns to ride the bike without our hands to hold her steady, or 2 training wheels to keep her balance, or 1 wheel just in case she's not ready, until she succeeds whenever that occurs. To be clear, I am not arguing for safetyism or this popular idea you may have heard of that children should be shielded from all forms of discomfort and failure. Indeed, I do discuss later in the book how the discomfort signals an opportunity for us to learn. But that said, we do not wait for children to fail to support them to learn. We can structure learning to succeed with incremental growth and scaffolding within their zone of proximal development. Our different vantage points can promote the difference we want to see in the world. Normalizing differences and different ways of experiencing the world can create change that encompasses everyone's experience. School systems do not need to wait for kids to fail to set them up for success. We can lean into our different vantage points to affirm and support everyone's success in school in the absence of failure, not at its exclusion.
Thank you. I love that story. It really made sense because I had 2 boys totally different. It was exactly the same kind of thing, that idea of the waiting for them to fail. One thing, I just was thinking about this, you bring up like the zone of proximal development, you bring in Piaget, you talk about the cognitive disequilibrium.
Yes.
You clearly have a background in developmental psychology, very advanced understanding, and you weave it throughout the book, which is brilliant. It really just brings it all to light and makes it very accessible. But the one question I had, and I realized I didn't write it down, but it's one that I really had was, as I was reading the book, the one thing that made me really angry was the idea of how many people, when you went to go see, they used your training and background against you. So could you tell a little bit about that? And
yes.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It happens
disturbing
all the time, still, presently. I share a couple of stories throughout the book how I'm basically dismissed. My concerns or my inquiry, my question, my ask was dismissed because I know too much. As though that is some sort of excuse or reason to not expect things to be better for my child and all children. And the reality is, yes, I do know more than, let's say, given situation because of my particular training. But the dismissal of my vantage point as a function of, well, like, how could you expect, what would you expect of us as a result of that is largely unacceptable. And that first time it happened, and it's kind of early in the book, I tell an experience on how I told my first son, Miles, I told his pediatrician at his 8-month checkup that I was really afraid that he had just stopped developing. It just felt like he just got quiet and just kind of stopped. And she looked at me and she said, you're a first-time mom. You have nothing to worry about. And you know too much because of what you do for a living, because I was a postdoc at the time in developmental psychology. And he had a seizure, his first seizure, a few months later. And as you can imagine, I did obviously switch doctors at that time, but the experience of having my maternal instincts gaslit, that lingered, right? That you hold that into the spaces and places there within. And so, it's been remarkable. And then I draw the juxtaposition later in the book to, I have a tremendous amount of privilege with the education that I've been afforded. And the white presentation of my skin and English as my language that I engage in, and there's all of these affordances there within that allow me and give me the opportunity, and I would dare I say obligation, to engage and to say something, because the reality is that not everyone has that opportunity to be at what I refer to later on as at that starting point, at that place to begin the engagement.
Yeah, it just, and that how you did continue to persevere and not to, I want to know that secret sauce, where you just kept that tenacity, perseverance, despite how many times. And so my next question really kind of goes, you're so open about your experiences with both Miles and Eleanor, and talking about the journey you had working through systems. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, but if someone was before you right now and said you could change legislation, you could go and policymakers, what would be your advice? So maybe first talk a little bit about the context and then.
Yes, yeah, I love this question. Thank you for it. I think maybe I'll go backwards. The way things are is not necessarily structured to be benefiting everyone, and the way it is not the way it can be, or it could be, or dare we say it should be, across systems. In the book I focus on education, medicine, and industry, but I have had people reach out to me from all different spaces and places of saying that they saw the same kind of angle and perspective and opportunities to embrace the mindset across every interaction that they have. And so when we think about, the ways from, the waiting for a diagnosis and the journey to a diagnosis with Miles, and I kind of go through a series of kind of interactions that it feels as though basically you're kind of climbing these never-ending hurdles of paperwork and process and systems, and then you get to the top and you think they're actually going to start helping your child, and instead it's just another wall, and now another set of rehearsal, another test, and now that one is timed out, and let's try something else. And meanwhile, in my son's case, his rare disease is called Phelan-McDermott syndrome, is regressive, and so as he ages, he loses skills. And so we were experiencing rapid decline while we were, moving through this systematized obstacle course of discrimination and ableism there within. And so this, this tension there within really it's been something that has been a continuous kind of motivator in recognizing that it does not need to be this way, and that we have opportunities at every turn to affect it, but we can change it with what we say and how we say it. And so, if we switch it over to thinking about it from a policy perspective, I think drawing policymaker, decision makers, and leaders with authority and privilege their attention to the opportunity that stands before them, that the way things are is not the way that they could be, and that there are other ways to be. And I use a analogy later in the book around a boulder, and this idea of a boulder. And some ways of being, the boulder is just so big that is literally all you know. It is the only way you can see it right now. But we all have the opportunity, and dare I say obligation, to see it and then do it differently.
No, I love the story about the boulder.
Salvatore
I really
is
did.
so proud of it. My son Salvatore, he tells everybody, because he's part of that story, and he's like, I was there with the boulder, and he like tell like kids, he's so proud. So when you get to it, just like feel his like grinning tween-age self on like he was there with the boulder.
He's so cute.
Can I just say one other quick thing
Yes,
that you
please
said?
do.
You were being so kind about like my resilience in the face of things, and I've been asked this a lot, like what kind of gets me through, and I talk about some of my coping skills there within in the book, and music being one of them, and running being another. But the real anchor here is my kids, because at the end of the day, at the end of the interaction, at the end of in engaging through these like systematized optimal course of injustice, right? Like they're still there. They're still like, I'm so blessed that they're still there, especially for my older son. Like they're looking at you, and he looks with those smiling eyes, and he wants to tell me what's going on. And like, how do you not just continue to show up? Right? Like they're there for you. They're reminding you every single day. And I think that that's what's different when it's in your own house, right? It's your own life as well. It allows you to use what I refer to in the book as your vantage point, right? And so many times different persons have respective vantage points that have been deemed a disadvantage. Right? You've heard that before, like disability is a disadvantage. But actually, we can take that and flip it and to really consider it as the vantage point from which you are engaging and seeing the world. And now you see it differently. And so you see the opportunities to affect change in ways that other people around you haven't had the opportunity to see it yet. So yeah, it's
so many great stories, Chris, and I mean, I could just bring up so many. I just love this story when Miles finally got his communication board, and you finally got that, and just recently with his watching hockey. Can you just tell, I'm sorry, you have to tell.
So Kim is connected to me on my personal social media, so she's telling a story about like not what's on the public thing, but I'm happy to share that. So my son Miles has a eye tracking device for communication. It's called a Toby. I do talk about our journey to getting one in the book as one of the many things that have opportunities to affect change. And for example, like one may think that technology must be so expensive and so time consuming to like develop, and it must be a casualty of supply and demand. Or perhaps you've been socialized to think that the needs of a person with disability just must take longer to be met, and that this is where the patience piece comes in throughout the book, are just expected to be patient with it there within. But we wouldn't expect that of other technologies that kids need. Right? We give out like Chromebooks like pizza on a Friday now in the ways that things engage. And what I found out about the Toby and kind of like the eye tracking device, as I share in the book, is that, I also thought like it must just be that this is so expensive and the technology is so intense that it must take all these 8 months to get it after you've finally been deemed eligible. And then I found that it's the same underlying technology that's literally in like every face device, like tracking device of, in all of our technologies and our wearables. It's the same thing that's in the Quest. So you could literally like add it, you could order it for like Amazon next day delivery in its like fun recreational form. But like my son, no, he's expected to just wait 8 months to communicate with us. And like, who knows what we will have lost or what life he hasn't lived in that 8 months, right? Like what should happen? And the point of my story was, hockey.
But first talk about the Thanksgiving parade and the Einstein commercial.
Yes. So we were watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I grew up in New York. That was like a thing, like for some of you maybe know. And my kids are watching it on TV. We were in New York watching it on TV at my in-laws' house this one Thanksgiving. And there was a commercial that came on from Einstein Medical Center. And it featured a young man using an eye tracking device. And I bawled. I was hysterical. I could not believe that like our reality was just on this like main stage. Like how many people watch the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade? And like the kid's going on this magical journey and he's playing games. And Sal and Eleanor are like, Miles is gonna be able to play games with us when he gets, like they saw like all this opportunity in that moment. It was absolutely beautiful. And then, since they're within and having his device, and most recently, I guess it was like last week?
I think so.
Last week or 2 weeks ago, Miles is using his device and he navigates to his, there's like a sports page and it's got like all the different like sports things on it. And he says, hockey, hockey, hockey. So one of our personal care assistants, she puts on, we have like a Google Home screen. We actually have, I should say sidebar, we have Google Homes everywhere in our house because prior to Miles losing his words completely, he used to say, "Hey Google, another song." And so we basically made it so that no matter where he was, if he said that, it would respond. Like, that's where we were in development before he lost his words. And so anyway, so there's a screen, and so she puts on like NHL highlights or something, and like none of us like do anything with hockey at all, like 0%. And he's watching it, and then he just starts talking, like he's got the neck, and he's like, goal, stick, hockey, and puck, and using all the hockey words. And we were all like, oh my gosh. And it wasn't like, he wasn't making mistakes. It was, he could have been choosing, glove and basketball, and like all the other sports are on the screen. And he was like in the hockey game, like physically excited, watching these highlights. And we let school know, and I was like, did you guys like learn a lesson about hockey today? Maybe like he goes to school at the campus school at Boston College, like maybe the students came and talked about hockey, and they're like, no. Like, we have no idea. So we're like, well, now Miles watches hockey. Like, all right, like let's learn about the hockey. Guess we're gonna be Bruins fans. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
I love that story because it just showed so much. You on the one hand tell kind of how you're dealing with the systems, but it does give a glimpse into your home, into your family, into the kids and how they interact. So one of the other questions, I have lots of questions, but one thing that I really was wondering, so you are also one of the world's leading experts in social emotional learning. And
right back at you.
Thank you. And I feel that I just want to know where you see the intersection of social emotional learning is for you. And I'm going to make it really personal. What are the social emotional competencies that you think you've developed? And are there any times that you didn't feel you were your best self in your social and emotional competencies?
It's a great question. So for me, social emotional learning is the foundation that underscores the entirety of this book. So the evidence-based skills and strategies that I teach, so there's lots of sentence starters and why to start it that way, how to frame, what to listen for, how are you feeling. That is all based from my research and the decades of research that came before me of what we know works in practical communication, affective response, emotion regulation, there within. So to me, it's an embodiment of it in its applied form, which is very different than the papers that nobody reads behind a paywall in a peer-reviewed journal, except the folks at the conference that I'm here in Chicago for right now. And your second part of your question was, I lost my...
It's for me, so I have to say...
Not my best self.
So some of my favorite parts of the book, I have to say, were when you were unapologetically impatient in a way that I think you stood up for yourself. And I know you would say, well, maybe it wasn't the best time, but I kind of was cheering you on. Can I just say that? I was like, way to go.
I have heard that from a few people. They're like, yeah, the amount of times you told stories about how you told somebody to F off in the story. And I was like, yeah, no, I did. I learned through that. But I kind of explained how that was not helpful. No one's needs got met. I was hot, I was angry, I was frustrated, my kid wasn't being met, I was angry at that doctor, I was angry at that school leader, and that solved nothing. It was just this kind of superficial, in the moment. And I can recognize that I have an opportunity to call people in and not out. Because when we're engaging in, and I kind of refer to it broadly as having you kind of listen for these signals of discomfort in yourself and the signals of when people say what the way things are, the way they do things, the way they answer you or the way they kind of set you up, that we can listen for these signals and we can invite them in because we are not meant to develop by ourselves and move through this world. It's not meant to be a siloed experience. And the people that you are engaging with, they are just, most cases, the face of the injustice in that moment. They are not actually, I don't think in most cases, the injustice themselves. They're the teacher who was tired and overworked, and the administrator who sized you up when you got there, and the doctor who was 2 hours late because of something that was completely out of their control. And so you don't need an opponent in the interaction you have with them. What you need is a partner. And the distinction here is that when we yell at someone or when we get angry and we get hot, we put them on the defense. And I kind of break down this psychology in the book. And in doing so and in breaking that down, they're no longer listening to learn from you. They're listening to win in that interaction. And so you've broken your opportunity to have a partner here. And this is where I talk about the opportunities for us to employ these skills to really begin to move and affect change, because if we can hear it in ourselves and recognize it and then start, it's incremental. This is not everything all at once overnight. It is a very slow process of hearing the way you're responding and what you're saying and trying it out and who you're engaging with. Like, what could be different? And I'll tell you what's been really incredible about the book, and I like to think of it as like seeds of hope and love that are kind of like going all through education and medicine and like worldwide, and the way it's getting picked up, that like I know that there are conditions for families like mine and everyone else's that are changing right now because of how people are responding. They're writing me these notes and they're saying like, I heard it, I saw myself in what you said, and I saw like this is what I could say, or like I didn't know I could say it. I could say anything at all, that I had a stake here, but you showed me I could say something and you gave me the tools of how to say it.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for that. You really kind of bring us to a different level. And I'm watching the time. Is that what time?
Yeah, I think we have like maybe about 10 to 15,
perfect.
10-ish minutes.
So one thing, actually one of my favorite stories, can you read it? The Digging Club?
Sure. Yes, okay. I flagged it because you told me you need to read that.
Well, what do your children teach you, really?
Hold on, I made a little flag in here for you because it's not something that I normally read out loud. Let's put it that way. No, but I'm happy to for you.
It's such a fun story.
Okay. When Eleanor came home from school in first grade and excitedly told us she was part of a gardening club during recess, we took her excitement as an invitation to run with her through the door she opened to grow her motivation and engagement with school. My parents, avid gardeners, ran through it too. They took Eleanor to the library, got her books about gardening. They got Eleanor her own gardening tools, and together we chose a small plot of grass in our backyard that all of our kids could start digging up to make a garden with Grandpa's help. My dad even gave her seeds from his garden to bring for her club at school. However, her teacher did not want to run through that door with us at all. Your daughter and her friends have been getting themselves into trouble with their gardening club during recess, Eleanor's teacher said matter-of-factly to me over Zoom while on her spring parent-teacher conference. So we told the girls yesterday there was to be no more gardening club. And today, I saw them all out there in their circle by the swing set. I went over to them and reminded them there was to be no more gardening club, and your daughter looked at me and said, "This isn't the gardening club, it's the digging club." I used every skill in my toolbox not to laugh in the teacher's face in that moment. I was so proud of my daughter and curious as to what kind of trouble was happening with their club that could warrant such disgust from her teacher. I didn't know if it was a sanctioned or organized activity, but based on her statement, I was guessing it wasn't. But the teacher continued, so I told her there to be no more clubs at recess for the rest of the school year. Hold on, I interrupted. It seems pretty out of line to ban all clubs in light of the disruption coming from one, and I am still unclear as to what was so disruptive about the gardening club to make it need to be banned in the first place. How can we help? I started offering a list of ideas. What if the kids had structured activities at recess to choose from, like stations, and maybe gardening was one of them? What if school staff supported the students to develop a code of conduct around their self-initiated clubs, provided some structure for them to achieve within? What if the kids excited about gardening were encouraged to read and learn more about gardening and prepare a lesson for their peers, or present at recess or the parent-teacher association? Penalizing students for being self-directed isn't going to help them succeed at this or any club they may dream up in the future. And the more children are told to wait out their interests until there is a more convenient time for the system to hear them, the less likely youth are to express their interest and dream outside of the box to begin with. And indeed, sometimes the waiting we're expected to do does feel like it's by design.
Thank you. And I just love Eleanor so much. Don't you just love that story?
I tell her how much you love her.
What brilliance, what brilliance.
She is brilliant.
So the other thing that you talk about is your running.
Yes.
And you just have to know, Chris ran the Boston Marathon a couple of years ago.
Did. I know it's marathon. I was seeing people with the jackets on at the hotel. I was having like all my feelings watching.
It's so amazing. So tell me about that, your running, and how it's to me, a metaphor for what you've been through. So can you just tell us a little bit about that?
I ran the Boston Marathon in 2023 I got to fundraise for my son Miles' school, the campus school at Boston College. So not getting like qualifying for a bib. Let's set our expectations. I am a consistent turtle. I can run far. And when I started running, and this is the story I begin to tell in the book, that I started running after I'd given birth to Eleanor as kind of this free way to lose baby weight. And I thought, okay, if I could just try to run to one song and then like walk to the rest of them, and then, okay, and maybe now I can run to 2 songs. It was incremental. And then when I could run to a whole album, and for me it was a band called The Starting Line. It was an album called Say It Like You Mean It. It was the 10-year anniversary live tour of it. Anyway, so we could talk about this another day. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do my first 5K, like at that point in time. And then a couple of years later, I've now lost the math on this. I think it's like 8 years later, I did my first marathon. And when I think about the strategies and skills that I teach in the book, I kind of draw this idea to like where you are in your starting line and in your progression there within. And some of us, it takes a while for us to even get to the starting line to engage because of societal conditions and kind of what we're working through personally, professionally, families, etc. But when you're there and you recognize it, you can take that first step and it can incrementally build in ways that are helpful and healthy for you and all and everyone around you. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have a day where you're going to take a few steps back. It doesn't mean that it's going to be every day, but you can see the progress over time. And in running, they often talk about like the runner's high that comes from like finishing a big race. And yes, that is like very true. And I can say as somebody who like ran as a charity bib, I was just starting to run and leaving Hopkinton to begin the marathon when the elite runners were like doing their final turns and crossing the finish line there within. But my finish wasn't any less like ceremonial than theirs, right? We were like we started at different starting lines in the same journey, but we were all finishers. And the other piece of it for me is that there's a beauty in and a power in the experience of being on the run, like the joy of what's happening in the interactions. And so I kind of draw that into those everyday interactions, ways you're engaging, that when you can see the joy and the opportunities for justice in your everyday, and you're working with, there's so many people here who work with young people who are sharing like all different levels of school supports, right? And as educators, as parents, as we're, in your families, you can recognize the joy in the journey. Your joy is not something to be waited for. It doesn't only come when you finish, but when you cross that finish line.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
I just love that because it also, it's really, you're in there for the long haul. I mean, anyways, there's just the being able to work through, it's just amazing.
Thank you.
The one thing I'm just thinking of people in the audience and that you've described your emotional labor of advocating for your children and how you've been tenacious, as I say. I feel like that's the tenacious. So what advice do you have for parents, for educators who also want to advocate? Like what advice would you give them?
Well, I encourage you to kind of start with one strategy. So I've heard from a lot of people, they're like, this is so chock full. It's like you put us on this train, and then it's like, like you said, I want to go back and like now look through it and get, right? Start with one. And I've heard with a lot of people that they start with the apology, which we didn't actually end up talking about this evening, but that is like a grounding part of the book of like why we apologize, and like hearing it. So, hear yourself and recognize, what are you apologizing for? Are you apologizing for your needs, for your family, for existence? Are other people apologizing to you for things that they can control? Are you, apologizing for learning, for asking questions of people who like it's their entire job to have the answer to your question? Like, why are we doing this? And like, how can we stop it? And what if you said, thank you, instead of I'm sorry? What if you started with gratitude? How does that shift the hierarchy in that situation? And that among others, but choose one. Start with one. It's incremental. It's not everything all at once. And it is exhausting, right? But our lives, right? And it's uncomfortable and messy and sticky and all the things, right? But we have an opportunity to engage one interaction at a time.
Yeah, that's so important, really, to have the strategies. I know I'm watching
I think we're like coming right up on time at this point. So I feel the room getting a little tired.
I have my last question. To really, you do have a lot of energy, Chris. And
I'm very like grateful.
I love that. No, it is. I have to say, I relate. I myself I'm best when I have multiple things happening. And
you are so good at I will never be able to write back at emails as fast as Kim. Like I want to be Kim when I grow up. Her ability to be responsive to people is just another level.
Maybe I'm on my device too much. But anyway, so now thinking about, finally the last word of thinking about what gives you hope these days?
Oh, I mean, my children and the ways that they, what they find joy in, where they're seeing joy, where they're finding joy, especially when things have been, unequivocally heavy for lots of us in lots of different dimensions and places across our existence right now. Knowing that I'm planting seeds of hope with the way in which the book is being distributed, and I don't think it's only coffee like table material. I think people are indeed reading it, so that it's affecting change in those interactions and shifting the ways in which and the recognition that we all can, right? That we all can play a role right now. I've often said in some of my teacher leadership trainings and so forth that leaders may be elected. So in school systems, leaders are elected. When I'm training with teachers, but leadership is bestowed, and so you can embody leadership in how you engage in your school, and you can invite your school leader in to shift the way in which they're leading. You can be part of the solution and not call out and create the problem or the kind of divergence there within.
Okay, I lied. I have one more question. Because the one thing in academia, just so you know, you often finish a study and you're already thinking about what your next study is going to be. Is it true?
Yes.
It's so true.
Oh yeah.
You're always thinking, okay, so what's the next book?
So I don't have the byline yet, but the title of it will be...
See, I didn't know this. This wasn't planted. I really didn't know this.
It'll be On Becoming and Interrupting Them. And so I will be working through, because I really don't believe that people go into caring professions as educators and social service and medicine and parents and to become them. To become those that dehumanize or don't see children as they are, who make decisions about families and conditions on the basis of money or other types of kind of identities. I don't think that people go into those spaces to become them. I think that along the way they are socialized to become them, and I want to really understand it and unpack it and figure out what those opportunities are to interrupt it, so that we can affect some change in our teacher training and our medical profession training, our business schools and so forth. So yeah, that's the next book.
I can't wait to read it. I love it. I love you.
Oh, I love you too. Thank you so much for doing this, Kim.
Oh,
thank you all so much for being here. It's been such a long conversation. I am so grateful to each of you, and I would hope we can stay and chat a little bit, but thank you so much.
No, I just, please join me in really thanking Chris for this amazing year.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.